my favorite episodes, which is Battlefield. There's a scene in which you're in a tank, and it's filling with water, and you're pounding on the glass because, you were really pounding on the glass, weren't you?
Well, nobody told me not to. But what happened was, it was a tank, probably a little bit smaller than that TARDIS, about that height, and it was the end of a long day's filming. We were rushing to get everything done in time, and I was called over. A ladder was put up by the side, and I got into the tank, was lowered down by the visual effects guys who were on the top, and they started filling the tank with this large pipe of warm water, which was rather nice, because usually it was cold water that they dumped me in Doctor Who. So it started filling up, and the sword was in there as well. And suddenly, they kind of realised that I couldn't hear anything, so Sylvester was right outside the tank, and the director came down onto the studio floor to direct, and he'd really lost the plot by this time, I think, the director, because he'd been so there was so much to do and so little time. So Sylvester, in a way, took over, and we had the hand signals to say, was I okay? Yeah, it was fine. And I was, we did a bit of acting, but I wasn't really hitting very hard, because obviously I knew it was glass. And I started floating eventually, because enough water came in. And I steadied myself on the front with my hands like this. And all of a sudden, I just felt this kind of under my hand. And I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't see anything or hear anything. But I don't know, it was just my instinct told me to just put my hands up like this. And then watching the video after it, I realised that Sylvester had reacted incredibly quickly and shouted at the top of his voice, "Get her out of there!" And the visual effects crew on the top, because they couldn't see anything, so that was what alerted them to, it was Sylvester's shout, to reach down and to pull me out. And it was just the most bizarre experience, because they pulled me out like this, and as I sort of came up, I saw the tank, it was just the front of the tank, a sort of billow out with the volume of the water, and it just crashed through the glass, the water, and just flooded all over the floor. And then, of course, there was the next problem, which was that all the electricity from running to the cameras and the big cables were all over the floor. So again, Sylvester shouted, "Turn off the power!" He really is a superhero.
Does that make up for his driving?
Yes. More than enough. But it was funny because there was a report in the paper, Doctor Who girl cheats death, I think it was. And I never really, I'm one of these people I'm quite pragmatic, and I never really thought, because I guess what would have happened is I would have kind of gone through the front of the glass with all the broken glass, so it could have been pretty horrible. But it didn't happen. It was all fine. Nobody was electrocuted. But if it hadn't been for Sylvester, I don't really know what would happen. Anyway, there was a full investigation, of course, and what had happened was that somebody hadn't really done their maths properly, because although they'd got the right thickness of safety glass for a tank of water, they hadn't reckoned for the displacement of the water caused when somebody's sort of thrashing around in there. And also, I think something like the safety glass, they said, we don't need to use that thick glass, we'll use a thinner one. And so that's, somebody had skimped, basically. And that wasn't good. But it really didn't affect me until many, many years later. There was a really wonderful film about a magician called The Prestige, Two Magicians. I don't know if anybody saw that. And And I went to see it with my husband, and one of the opening parts of the film is when there's a big tank of water on a stage in front of an audience, and the assistant magician is tied up and lowered into the tank, and she has to try and escape in a certain amount of time. And basically she doesn't make it, and they smash the tank open with axes. And as I was watching this, I suddenly felt really weird, and it was really bizarre. I started shaking like this and feeling very tearful and, you know, very emotional. And I realised afterwards it was delayed shock. All those years, my body had sort of held on to this memory, and just seeing that episode happening to somebody else, it sort of obviously triggered that in me, and I was able to kind of, you know, let it go. But it's really, really amazing, because at the time I didn't think